Hi folks, welcome to the Ask the Art podcast, where this week we're going to be looking at questions and answers. Hi folks, pleasure to have you along. So if this is the first time you have found us, we would love you to give us a follow, subscribe to the podcast. We stick out a new episode every Monday morning, and our mission here is to help homeowners, developers, architects, planning consultants with tree and arboricultural related survey issues. So give us a wee follow. There's also some useful videos out on our main YouTube channel which might be helpful for you. So in this episode we are returning to our popular Q&A format. So I have got 6 questions in here from listeners, although some of them haven't got names against, but we've got 6 in here from listeners. But first, this. Hi folks, it's time for You Couldn't Plan It, the feature where me and my team have scoured the internet for stupid, silly and downright infuriating planning related facts. Let's go. Hi folks, so this one I'm going to talk about something interesting that our one of our tree surveyors actually discovered this a little while ago, and this is a news article about a tree in southern Scotland, specifically in an area called the Trossachs. So this veteran tree, otherwise known as the bicycle tree near Brigo-Turk, I'm probably absolutely murdering the pronunciation of that, dates from the late 19th century, and the tree basically grew in or near to the scrap heap of the village blacksmith, and it's basically encapsulated, or what we call included, several metal objects over the years into the tree. And most notably, and we'll try and find a photo to put up on the screen, most notably this includes an early 20th century bicycle from which it received its name, and reputedly a ship's anchor and a chain. So yeah, this is a local landmark that is well recognised, and it's become so well recognised that it has now got a tree preservation order on it. And Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority slapped a TPO on this in March 2016. So yeah, this is a sycamore tree that is located just north of the village of Brigo-Turk in Scotland, in Loch Lomond National Park, and yeah, it's eaten a bicycle. So we'll see if we can stick a picture up on that. I'm sure you've seen those before on the internet. It's quite a popular one. So there we go, that's that. Right, let's have a dig into the questions and see what we have got here. So we won't be doing a panic line this week because it's all about the questions. So let's have a look. What have we got here? So first off, we've got one here from Kevin, and Kevin says, why do tree surveys cost so much and they only take a few hours on site? Well, Kevin, yes, I mean, we like to sell on value, and you know, ultimately there is a cost to everything these days, and tree surveys, you know, the price of tree surveys has gone up the same as it has for everything, really. Inflation is a wonderful thing, isn't it? But to answer your question directly, yeah, I mean, the consultant might only be on site for a few hours, but the reality is that there's a lot more that goes into it. The site work element is probably only 10% of the actual job. So what happens is that the consultant comes out to site and they've got a calibrated tape measure, possibly a drone and a camera and lots of other tools, and they've basically got to plot and measure all of those trees on site to create something called a tree constraints plan, and you know, that is a considerable piece of work. So they might only spend 10 minutes on site, 20 minutes on site, a few hours on site. But the reality is that there's a whole load goes into that, on the build up to the site visit, and then also after the site visit as well. And depending on the size of the company, obviously all the overheads of that company as well to take on, office staff, vehicles, etc., etc., etc. So I can't imagine anybody will be paying less than sort of 500 quid plus VAT for a tree survey to support a planning application these days. So thanks a lot for that one, Kevin. What else have we got? Number 2. Let me pull that across here. Is it true that bats can stop a whole housing development? No. Would you like me to expand on that? There's no name against this one. It's anonymous. No is the answer. So basically what has to happen is bats are a European protected species, and therefore certain things have to happen to ensure they're protected through the development phase. And at one end of the spectrum, we have all the nonsense around, HS2, bat tunnels and bat bridges and all sorts of ridiculousness. And then at the other end, we might have somebody who's just doing a small residential extension, 2-story extension. They might have bats in their loft, and they just need to do some appropriate mitigation. And there's a whole suite of surveys that need to be done to ensure that those protected species are protected through development. So they're not going to stop the development. There's just certain things that have to be done to make sure that that roosting place is correctly categorised and provided for moving forwards after the development. So they're not. Despite the headlines, bats don't stop development. They just make it a little bit more complicated sometimes. Laura has got, what's the difference between an arboricultural impact assessment and a tree safety survey? I have been asked for a tree safety survey. So an arboricultural impact assessment is what we were talking about before when we were talking about costings of tree surveys. An arboricultural impact assessment, or an AIA, is basically it's the first stage of a report to support a planning application where there are trees on or adjacent to the site, and it's basically setting out information in a way that you, the developer, can see what effect, if any, your development is having on trees. A tree safety survey sits outside the planning process, very, very different, and this is where your tree stocks or your tree population is looked at every usually 3 years using a visual tree assessment methodology, VTA methodology. There are others, that's the one we use, to see whether the tree's got any signs of decay or damage or snaplings, mechanical damage, all that kind of good stuff. There's actually, Laura, there is actually a video that I did on tree safety surveys a little while ago. We'll link that somewhere, and go and watch that one, and that will tell you all that you need to know about that. What have we got here? Where are we? Fiona said, quite frankly, I've heard local councils ignore reports. Is that true? No. It depends, Fiona, which direction you're coming from. I can sense a bit of anger. I suspect this is from a social media post because it's very, very brief and there's no context. So I'm going to assume that you're maybe objecting to a planning application. I don't know. We have situations quite often where local bodies, neighbours, they might commission their own reports to make sure that what the developer's ecologist or arboriculturalist is saying is robust and defensible. I've never heard of local authorities ignoring reports. In fact, the more reports and the more information they have, the better, because if you think about it, their position, they've got to defend their position quite often at committee or in the public domain. Their name's on that report, so they want to make sure that it follows best practice and best guidance. So yeah, I don't feel that I've never come across them ignoring reports that have been presented to them if those reports have been carried out in the correct way. Next we have got here from Barry, do tree officers have the power to block planning applications? Do tree officers have the power to block planning applications? In relation to trees, yes, they do. Barry, if they feel that there is insufficient information to determine the application, if the information that they have been given isn't good enough, then they may well object to the application. So it's not so much block, it's more object and request further information. So for instance, a situation we come across fairly often is that a customer might come to us for support for a tree survey to support planning application, and they've previously, either the architect or themselves, they've tried to do their own tree reports. That might be pictures, some guesstimated text, maybe a few paragraphs. That's not presented in a way that the tree officer can make a robust and defensible assessment of the impacts on the development, and therefore they may well object or place a holding objection on the planning application until they've got the information that they require. This next one that is in from Caroline. Caroline says, what's the weirdest or most frustrating client request you've had? The weirdest? I can't think of anything. The weirdest or most frustrating client request we've had. What we find quite frustrating is that we go out of our way to help people. Not everybody wants to be helped. And believe it or not, although, and I've never spoken about this before on the podcast, although we run a business, we do actually vet the people that we choose to work with, because it's not worth my team's energy and time to be working with people that aren't a good fit for the way that we like to do business, and B, our sort of values and visions that we've got as a company. So we quite often, if we pick up on a customer that might not be aligned with what we're doing, so they're trying to pull a fast one, or potentially they're trying to get a second opinion that tells them what they want to hear, then we don't actually let them get much further than an initial email or initial conversation, Carolyn. So we do get. I suppose the most frustrating thing that my team deal with are can you just requests. So to give you an example, we might deliver a report, and we're only a small part of a big machine, and it may be that later on the customer has a change of heart, they have some feedback from the local planning authority, and they may want to change their plans, and they'll come back to us and say, can you just alter this report, can you just rerun this BNG, can you just, and actually there's a huge amount of work that goes into that. So it's not a simple change. We're not just changing the address, it might completely change the conclusions of the report. So those kinds of things are very frustrating in smaller teams. Larger teams tend to know that there's going to be costs associated with rerunning that, but that's probably the most frustrating is changes to the site that mean that we've got to redo elements of our work, and that, we're a business at the end of the day, that can't be done free of charge. But in terms of the weirdest, I guess probably one of the weirdest jobs we've ever done is for an offshore energy park up in Orkney, where our ecologists went up there with drones and also our drone team, and they were doing surveys for marine mammals, for consenting, to make sure that the infrastructure that was going into the sea wasn't going to have a negative effect on the marine mammals. So that was probably the weirdest request that we've had, and also very enjoyable as well. So I will wrap that one up here. We're coming to the end of the questions that we've got. So we would love you to send us in, if you've got a live application, anonymise it, but we're more than happy to have a look at anything. So please do send that in to us. You can find our contact details in the links in the podcast, or you can go to our website and pop us an inquiry through there, which is rover-group.co.uk. And I will speak to you on the next one.